You're listening to the Ninja Tune podcast, and I'm your guest host, James Heather, and I'll be interviewing Julianna Barwick. Julianna spoke about music that has signposted and influenced her life from the more ambient, modern, classical soundtrack and electronic worlds, kind of like a desert island disc for the underground. She chose 11 songs in total, and we played a few tracks of her own, ranging from her mum's act, True Life Singers, through to the Beach Boys, Panda Bear, John Williams, Danny Elfman, Enya, Bjork, Tori Amos, Apex Twin, Sigur Rós, and William Basinski. Julianna is a composer, vocalist and producer who makes deep reflective compositions out of the human voice. Her last album, Healing is a Miracle, was released in 2020 on Ninja Tune. She spoke at length about making the track In Spirit, which opens the album, and also one of her earlier tracks, one of my favourites of all time actually, The Harbinger. So it was brilliant to get into that. We also spoke about singing caves in Iceland, her love of Rnb karaoke singing, making music on Garageband, and how Enya needs more respect. Welcome to the Ninja Tune podcast, Julianna. How's it going?
Things are great. I'm enjoying 2023 so far. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's back to work last week. It's very ridiculously cold here in London.
No.
So I think it's due to be -5 in the next few days. So
oh my gosh.
But LA had some crazy weather recently, didn't it? Like all rain.
Yes. I mean, we had rain yesterday, but last weekend it was crazy, and there's crazy flooding happening all over California. So, we're a state that's often in a drought, and I think I read yesterday that a lot of the water is just flowing out to sea, which is like a waste of the water from the rain. So I think that they're trying to figure out how to redirect the flooding to actually, help out the drought situation. But yeah, pretty crazy.
Don't they have to pump in the drinking water from a long way away to LA as well? Or is that not?
So.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm like remembering my New York City days, and I think the same is true for there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. The water here is pretty crazy. Everyone kind of like either double Britas it or filters it some other way 5 times because it's pretty intense.
It's amazing to have you on a Moving Sound. I've wanted you on for many years now. I think we met just before my first ever episode, actually, like in the months before, when you signed to Ninja Tune.
Yeah, exactly.
And we met there when you signed, and privileged to have you on. And today we're going to go through some of your favorite records that have influenced you within the sort of Moving Sounds world of genres we tend to cover on the show. So thanks so much for putting the list together. Was it quite hard or?
No, I mean, I only have one regret that actually came to me this morning, and maybe I'll end up mentioning it. But
yeah,
thanks for having me, and also it was just great fun to look back and think about those songs that were, really formative in my music world.
And
so,
your first choice is I think it's your first choice is something not many people would have heard, unless it's maybe it did get an official release. But I got the impression from you maybe it didn't. But tell me if I am wrong. But it's from your mum and her group in a church. Is that right?
Yep. I grew up going to church. I mean, I've said this many times. I grew up going to church at least 3 times a week. My dad worked for the church, so we were there constantly. He did all this stuff for all the kids. So, summer camps, ski trips, blah, 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 blah. My mom is a beautiful singer. And a few of the people that went to this church where I grew up made a little singing group, a cappella, of course, because that's the Church of Christ's way. But they made LPs. And so they made a couple records, and they had matching outfits when they performed. And, as a little tiny kid, that was extremely exciting because I was a big fan of like people on TV that performed. I emulated them, like even like people like Tammy Faye Baker. So to see my mom in like an outfit with tulle and rhinestones, which I think I'm remembering that correctly, was very exciting. But this group sang together a cappella, recorded, and this song is one that I remember singing in church, my whole life. And I always loved the way it ended up kind of going in rounds. And I sang this song with everyone around the campfire many, many times. And my mom's group, True Life Singers, recorded it. It's called Jesus is Lord. So, my mom's voice is, probably the most formative thing there is. She's still always singing around the house. She sang, I listened to her when she was standing next to me in church. I'd hear her when she was singing with this group. So, from zero, what other track could it possibly be?
And when you say singing in rounds, do you mean kind of like, it's almost like loops, but acoustically?
Yeah. It's instead of like harmonies, it's like the melody will start, and then one group will be singing that, and then another group will come in with the melody in a different place. So it's kind of like starting here and they're going, and then the other group will come in later, and it's kind of like going around in rounds. So much of the music that I grew up with in the church informed the way I make music now, from it being very vocal driven, rounds, layers, the reverb from all the auditoriums.
Have you heard the Peter Broderick's the Beacon Sound Choir? This is like a drone choir, basically.
I haven't.
Oh wow, I'm gonna have to share that with you. I think it's a choir he found in Wales, and Peter from Erased Tapes, and it's kind of droney, and it's improvised. It's purely improvised, I think, as well.
Oh, cool! I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I'll share that with you afterwards. But so it's True Life Singers is the name of your mum's act. And then where can people find that in most places, like in terms of streaming services? And where can if someone wants to get it, where would they go?
Well, actually, when you Google it, like in quotation marks, there's this website that comes up called We Care Ministries. Yeah. And the tracks are downloadable, but I forget what kind of track they are, and I had to convert it to MP3. But it's like an ancient thing, it looks like it was made, on Netscape, like in the 90s, early 90s. So.
Pre-MySpace.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of amazed that it's still functional in any way, but it does exist.
Okay, great. This is True Life Singers and Jesus is Lord.
My Redeemer, how he loves me, how I love him. He is risen, he is coming. Lord, come quickly. Hallelujah. What a friend we have in Jesus. All
Yeah, so Julianna, you grew up in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
I have quite a limited, I've never been there really. So my knowledge of Louisiana would just be things I see in films, really. And so, yeah, just explain what it's like growing up there.
I mean, I lived there till I was 5. So
okay.
It's all these kind of like fuzzy, hot weather, scent driven memories,
Yeah.
you know, lots of pine needles and mimosa flowers and things like that. As a congregation, we all sang the hymns a cappella. So, you know, and those, especially to a tiny kid, an auditorium, you know, just made the sound swell, and it was very reverberant, and it was all vocals. I mean, besides like an occasional clap or whatever, that was allowed. But, you know, all of this music, and a lot of it, or a lot of what I was drawn to, even as a tiny thing, was the very beautiful and sad and almost like sorrowful hymns, you know, and with these stacked vocals and this kind of like reverberant spaces. I mean, it's, you know, it's no surprise that really, you know.
You think that's where you got your lifelong addiction of reverb from?
Definitely. Been chasing that reverb ever since.
I mean, it's a question I had later on, but I might as well ask you now. Like, where's the place you'd most like to find reverb? Is there a place you want to go where you're going to get the best reverb for your voice that you haven't been yet?
Well, I've heard that, you know, I made a record in Iceland with Alex Summers in 2012, and I heard that there are singing caves there, and that is extremely exciting to think about. But I'm also like a lifelong, literally, parking garage fan, or like a very, very, very long stairwell is very exciting. I remember, you know, I went to Hunter College in New York, and the photography, you know, the darkroom was on the top floor, and I would spend a lot of time just like ducking into the stairwell and singing until I heard a door open. You know, so I've always loved that. I have entertained myself for countless hours since I was born doing that. So
just like noticing how it reacts to your voice and how different shapes of rooms does different things. And
yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah, we should I want to get through all your choices today. So your next choice is I mean, they're pretty a cappella band at times as well. The Beach Boys, and Don't Worry Baby. Yeah. Let us know why you chose this track today for Moving Sounds.
When I was super little, I mean, it was like in my life from birth, I'm pretty sure I had a little Fisher Price LP player, little record player. And we had a few 7-inches, I'm sure from my parents, like high school or college days. And one of them was Beach Boys 7-inch. And on one side it was I Get Around, and the other side was Don't Worry Baby. And I listened to that constantly. So there's another example of really lush, reverberant, you know, harmonies and stacked vocals, and just such a unique sound. So, you know, I'm sure anytime if I put that on today, it would just bring me back to, you know, the carpet in the house I grew up in, you know, nice. And things like that. Yeah.
This is the Beach Boys and Don't Worry Baby.
Oh, I don't know how long.
So I read that you didn't go to university to make music. Same as me, actually. I initially went a different route and then ended up in music in some way. I'd say most people I've had on the show maybe did study it at uni. I still think it's more common than not to have studied it at uni, especially maybe in the modern classical type world. So yeah, I guess I'm just curious, like for anyone listening who thinks, oh my God, I didn't study it, can I even go into it as a career? Of course you can, but yeah, pros and cons. Like sometimes I think I wish I had gone because I might have met lots of like-minded people who I could have worked with. I've had to come about it from a different angle. So maybe you meet more people, but yeah, but what do you think, pros and cons of actually studying music and then getting into it?
My perspective on that was I just never, I have so much joy in creating music, and it's always been kind of a spur of the moment thing. I don't compose anything ahead of time. It's sitting down with stuff and plugging things in and, you know, trying things out and then like hitting record and just layering on top of that. It's never writing things out ahead of time. You know, for instance, when I went to record with Alex Summers, you know, he was like, do you have any demos? I'm like, no, I don't know how to do that. Like, I want to be in the moment and like be inspired by my environment and all of that. So what I'm trying to say is I never wanted to be, I didn't really like high school very much at all. And I certainly didn't want to be in a situation where it was a drag for me to make music. Like, you know, like I don't want to spend all weekend doing this composition that I don't care about. That's not from the heart. That, you know, I just never wanted it to be a drag. Yeah. I just knew that like it just wasn't going to be a good fit, because every time I ever made music, you know, from the time I was a kid, I'm like in those stairwells and those parking lots and those auditoriums, I was just making stuff up. And I loved doing that. I still love doing that. And I just never wanted it to be a thing that I wasn't looking forward to. And, you know, my dad taught me darkroom photography in high school in our bathroom because he had an enlarger and all that stuff because his dad taught him. And I thought, you know, I'll do that because I definitely want to do something that's artistic. But with photography, it's like a whole different set of rules, because I am very particular about how I like to set things up, and I'm looking to make the perfect portrait, which takes a lot of forethought and planning. And, you know, what speed film am I going to use? You know, what camera am I going to use? All these things. What kind of light am I using? Where am I going to do it? How do I want the end result to be? There's a lot of planning. So I knew I would respond well to that in school. Whereas with music, I didn't want to be tethered to anything. I want to just be like doing my thing and doing it in the spur of the moment.
And then, like, so how did you first sort of get that first release out? I want to play, is it UNT9 from your debut release, Sanguine?
Yeah, all of those are like Untitled 9 or whatever.
That's my favorite from your, I love that track.
Cool.
So maybe you could just, how did you, I mean, it's like 2007, right? So
that's when I released it. I started making those in like 2005.
It was quite a funny time for the industry because that era, because it was like digital, you know, there wasn't really people streaming or downloading illegally so much. CDs had slowed down a bit. It was quite a hard time to release music, maybe, and that's when you started. So what are your memories of how you got into it, and that track in particular would be awesome.
Yeah, well, with all of the tracks on Sanguine, that came out, that's my very first little self-release. That came out in like January 2007. I started making all of those, I think around summer 2005. And A friend of mine had a guitar pedal, like a delay pedal, but if you like held it down, it would loop. And he showed me how to loop. And I brought it home with me. I borrowed it, brought it home, and I already had my little Fostex 4-track since I was like probably 18 or 19, little cassette tape recorder. So yeah, I just started experimenting with the loop feature on that little pedal and recorded it onto cassette tapes. And I think on Sanguine I recorded, there's some guitar on there, there's like some other stuff on there that I recorded over it, but of course they're just like little 2-minute bursts or whatever. It's just like getting my feet wet and exploring. But yeah, once again, like all of those tracks was just like doing something in the spur of the moment and just recording it, and like, it satisfied that, liking to work really quick, thing that I have. It worked well with my constitution, where I didn't have to, spend a lot of time figuring out ahead of time what it was going to sound like. I just did it, and it kind of happened magically. And then in the end, I had something that there's no way I could have planned. So it was exciting because I was like, whoa, where did that come from? But it just hit everything perfectly with the way I like to do things. And it was exciting because I just, I had tried to do the singer-songwriter thing, and that was just not going to happen. And then everything just sort of clicked with the looper.
Two questions really. Were there other people around you doing similar looping type vocal style, or did it just come out of nowhere and you didn't really know about other people doing it at the time? And also, was it nerve-wracking, your first ever release, when you put it out into the world, or not really?
I'm trying to think. In 2005, like Panda Bear's first record, and even things like a lot of Brian Eno stuff, that I didn't know about, that I listened to later. I was like, wow, that kind of, that sounds like the stuff I did for Sanguine, and I had never listened to this stuff before. So I think I don't really remember being around that. I mean, I remember seeing like Tune Yards many years later, at least a couple years later, using a looper on stage. And I don't know, I guess I don't really remember seeing it very much while I was doing it. I really don't. I think it was also just kind of like I said, the kind of choral rounds and layers kind of thing I grew up with, because in addition to growing up in a church where we all sang a cappella, I was also in choirs from elementary school all the way through until I was in opera chorus after high school. So just so much choral, information.
And when you're looping the different vocals, obviously it's very instinctive, but are you almost going back to that childhood where you can imagine the different people in the room in a choir, and you're looping all the different parts, or how can you describe how you decide how to loop the vocals on top of each other, or is it just pure instinctive?
It's purely instinctive. It's kind of this weird magical thing. It's it just kind of comes from somewhere. But what you were asking about with the release of Sanguine, I ended up working for a musician in 2006, and I was introduced to some people who helped me put all the stuff that was on MySpace in 2005 and 6. I asked, how do you make a CD? Had no idea, didn't know what mastering was, got hooked up with Paul Gold to master it and brought him a bag of cassette tapes. And, you know, that's not what you're supposed to do. But I didn't know. But I was really eager to put it out. It was a really exciting time for me. And then when the CDs came out, I remember like slipping them under the doors of venues in Williamsburg, New York, like Pete's Candy Store and Glass House Gallery before it was Glasslands. And, you know, I was like excited to try and make it a thing.
Well, let's give it a listen. So it's Julianna Barwick and Untitled 9, and then I'll go into the other track you mentioned, Good Girl Carrots by Panda Bear, to follow. Choice is from the film Empire of the Sun. I'll probably say this totally wrong. Surogan. Surogan?
I'm not sure.
You don't know? Yeah.
It's Welsh. We can make
it's guess. Welsh. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this pick today and why it's signposted your life in some way.
Yeah. I mean, next to, you know, that first track, my mom's group, next to that, this is definitely, you know, the most influential track and experience and introduction to John Williams. I mean, it kind of like covers so many bases that have followed me through my whole life. I remember our family went to see Empire of the Sun in the theater, so I was like 7 or 8 years old. And it opens with this boy choir singing Suogan, or however you say it. It's a Welsh lullaby. It's a Welsh lullaby. So, I'm assuming John Williams did the arrangement around it. But that was my first introduction as like a little kid, with this, with a boy choir, which is just such a beautiful and unique sound. And the melody is so gorgeous, and the movie was so haunting and so wonderful, and I still cry every time I watch it, every single time. Like Christian Bale's performance is insane. He's like 12 years old. It's like the most prodigious thing you've ever seen. So yeah, I mean, I got that soundtrack. I was like a soundtrack nerd as a little kid. I mean, I remember loving that, and Somewhere in Time, which is one I forgot to add to my track list, but I taught myself so much of the music from Somewhere in Time on our piano at home. I still know how to play it, how I taught myself how to play it as a little kid, because I just loved it so much. So, I've just always, since I was a kid, been very, very much into, soundtrack music and scores and things, and taught myself how to play it. But in particular, Empire of the Sun, not just the lullaby, but all of the music that John Williams composed for that is just absolutely gorgeous. And I go and see him every summer. He's still conducting in his 90s at the Hollywood Bowl every August, September. And every time I go, which is every year, I'm just trying to will it that they'll play something from that movie, but they haven't done it yet. But yeah, that's like the biggest.
I bet they play Star Wars. Star Wars.
Oh yeah. They always end it with the Imperial March and everyone's waving their lightsabers. But yeah, I mean, that soundtrack is it's crazy. That had a huge influence on me. Absolutely huge.
This is Salgan from the film Empire of the Sun by James Rainbird and the Ambrosian Junior Choir, arranged by John Williams. your next choice is from Edward Scissorhands.
Mm-hmm.
The Ice Dance track by Danny Elfman.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that film was just amazing at the time, wasn't it? So gothic.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
I haven't seen it for years, but tell us about that
it
track.
is worth a revisit. Yeah, I mean, that's another one. I'm not sure. I definitely saw Beetlejuice in the theater. So that was in 87 too, I think. So same as Empire of the Sun. And of course the music for that is just Danny. No one else could have done that. Danny Elfman just it was absolutely perfect for Beetlejuice, and Beetlejuice is one of my favorite movies. But then a little later came Edward Scissorhands, and that beautiful choral music. Ooh, it's just so beautiful and kind of Christmassy, and it was just another moment in like movie history that made me as a kid just want to cry in a good way.
Was it that film, if I can remember rightly, like they were in that castle at the top and it was all kind of gothic, and then but the town below was like really like Back to the Future or something. Just
it was
really
like,
colourful.
Yeah, it was like cookie cutter, like kind of 50s style, 60s style, lots of pastel, it's just the antithesis of his like spooky castle up on the hill.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, just such a sweet.
They don't make films like that anymore.
No, they definitely don't.
So this is Ice Dance from the Edward Scissorhands soundtrack. One of my favorite ever songs by yourself is Harbinger from 2013, I think.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Is it the Nepenthe album?
Nepenthe, yeah.
Nepenthe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's basically one of my favorite songs of all time.
Aww.
So if you could give me any piece of trivia about it and the listeners, it'd be amazing. Or just how you made it, or
absolutely
any nuggets of information.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's the only song that I've ever said is like maybe my favorite. It means a lot to me. It's and the working track title was May 1st for the longest time. The records leading up to Nepenthe were Sanguine, Fluorine, and The Magic Place. And all of those I made by myself with Garageband, for the non-layered, non-looped vocals, I was singing directly into my laptop, Yeah, just following my nose, going to Garageband workshops in Soho, Apple Store, you know, reading manuals and things like that. But then along comes an email from Alex Summers sometime in January 2011. And he wrote me and he said, hey, I love your music. I'd love to make something together here in Iceland. And I just wrote back in 2 seconds, yep, me too, let's do it. You know, like that was like maybe the quickest response I've ever, you know, made to an email. And of course we met up a couple times during that year when he was in New York for something or other. And I just, you know, I was a little nervous at first, like, well, like all the music that I made so far is literally I made on my bed for the most part, except for the Magic Place, which I made in actually Sufjan's studio at the time, because that was an Asthmatic Kitty record. But I had never had eyes or ears on me ever. Everything was, I did it all myself. So I was kind of nervous about having someone listen to the pieces parts until it was complete. But then I hung out with Alex, and he's like world's most adorable human. And I just thought this is going to be great. And, you know, he had an actual studio with fancy equipment, and we worked in the Sungling studio, which is the Sigur Rós swimming pool studio in Reykjavik. We had a few days there and recorded Amina playing strings, and friends of Alex's, their teenage daughters, like Gagi from Sigur Rós, one of his daughters was in this group of girls who sang on the record. And yeah, that track was just one of the tracks we made together. And like I said, you know, I didn't go to Iceland with any demos, so I would just go to his house in the morning and come up with something, and we would build from there.
Oh, you wrote it all there. Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, the combination of being in Iceland as a huge Bjork and Sigur Rós fan, and making music there and working with Alex, who's so special, and like having, you know, Biggie, the engineer at Sungling, like working that desk, and Amina playing strings. It was a whole new world for me, and it was so emotional.
A bit different to sitting on the end of your bed. And
absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, there's so many emotions, and of course Iceland is just breathtaking and moving and emotional, just to be in its beauty. So yeah, that was like a turn for me, for sure. Really? I proved to myself also that I didn't have to work in one way, and it did work to collaborate with other people, which I was nervous about, but it ended up being such a beautiful time in my life. And, you know, I lived in New York when I recorded that record, and Alex lived in Reykjavik, and now we're both out here in LA. So it's wonderful to be able to see him anytime
you want. Well, that's lovely, evocative hearing about how that track was made. So this is your good self and Harbinger. And Julianna, you've chosen Enya as one of your picks today, Evening Falls. I don't think Enya gets the respect she deserves, you know. I in terms of
strongly.
I feel like she should be on front of magazine covers, because so many artists love her, but I don't know, there's something she doesn't quite get, you know, the attention I feel she deserves.
Oh yeah, I mean, I hear her influence all over.
The respect, I think.
Yeah, I hear her influence all over the place.
Yeah.
And I think it's this thing where, you know, it became like you laugh at new age music, or, you know, people think it's, you know, music or whatever. But
it got a bit popular, didn't it? It just went really overground for a bit.
Yeah, totally. And like people thought it was cheesy or whatever. Yeah. But I definitely remember having all of her tapes. We had it on cassette tape. And then I remember having Watermark on cassette tape. Our family did. And, you know, that's where my dad's influence actually comes in. My mom's a beautiful singer, and I heard her singing my whole life. But my dad's always been into, like, he's been very adventurous with music, and, like, you know, would listen to this Hearts of Space program that had a lot of, like, ambient and kind of weird music that he would always listen to. And I heard that growing up. But we had every single Enya record growing up. And, it was really hard to pick a track, because every time I hear those old records, it's just, whoa, I'm like back in my childhood. But this one, I taught myself this song on the piano, and I can still play it the way I taught myself how to play it when I was a little kid. So she was a huge influence on me. Huge. I mean, between her and, you know, growing up singing with the church and then in the choirs, I mean, that influence is just huge in what I've made.
Do you think she gets hit up much by, like, contemporary producers and stuff? She must get.
She must.
Does she, like, I feel like she hasn't been on, like, any really sort of cutting edge contemporary records, but she must get asked.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is the Fugees sample.
Yeah.
You know, there's that. So, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like she is a very, you know, like, quiet to herself artist, which, I mean, I would be too. I mean, she's just hanging out in her castle with her cats, as far as I've read. So yeah. I don't think she's much of a live performer either, you know. But if I ever heard that Enya was doing a world tour and needed an opening act, I'd be asking my booking agent to send an email.
or putting a CD through her front door, like in the New York days.
Exactly.
So, this is Enya and Evening Falls.
that this time is real. Am I lost in this feeling, like a child passing through, never knowing the reason? I am home, I know the way. I am home, feeling oh so far away.
And you mentioned earlier about your experience in Iceland and your love of Bjork, and you've chosen a Bjork track today, Human Behavior.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, why did you pick that track, other than it's obviously a classic?
Well, I mean, that track in particular, I mean, that whole record, but that track in particular, because that's the first track I heard from the record. You know, that was like when I was 13, that record came out, and I lived in Tulsa. I was, you know, obsessed with Pearl Jam. I was in love with Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
You know, but I went to the mall one day and saw the debut CD, and I was just strangely drawn to it. Bought it with my, you know, waitressing money. And took it home, and you know, there were so many striking things about it. It wasn't mainstream. This was like a person with a really crazy name. I'd never seen a, you know, an Icelandic name before. And where was Iceland? You know, it was all very new to me. And I was like, wow, she's like a solo artist, but she's not like Debbie Gibson or, you know, like any of these other like solo female artists that I'd grown up with. It was just like a totally new thing. And that her voice was so unique, and all of the textures of the different songs on that record just blew my mind. I think I was about 13 whenever that record came out. And Human Behavior in particular is just, has there ever been a song before or since that sounds like that? No.
I know.
It's so unique. And it just, you know, had me deep diving into, you know, alternative music from there on out. And I became, you know, deeply obsessed with her.
It sort of came out of nowhere, didn't it? Like, I remember MTV at the time, I used to watch it all the time, and I guess Nirvana was on it, obviously, and they were, but when Bjork came on it, it was just like, her videos were on MTV in the early 90s. It was just like nothing else. It just came out of nowhere, it felt like.
Yeah, and she looked so cool and beautiful, and her clothes were so rad, and it was just so exciting. There had never been anything like her before or since, obviously.
In the pandemic, I explored her early punk bands.
Oh, yeah.
So after she was like a child star and before she started Sugar Cubes, she was in like quite a few different punk bands. It is on Spotify and you know, streaming services, and there's quite a lot of different names, a lot of different like punk bands. It's I have to dig that up actually. Such an interesting career, hasn't she?
Definitely. And I definitely listened. I got, you know, in my obsession, I got everything I could get my hands on. So I, you know, had all the Sugar Cubes records and stuff too in high school. Yeah.
Nice. So this is Bjork and Human Behavior.
If you ever get close to a human and human behavior, be ready to get confused. And me
And then you were saying earlier that you use, and I think you still do use, Garageband.
Yep.
Yeah, and then did you mention like a lot of your early records you literally sang into the laptop, so you didn't have like any posh mics, you didn't really have microphones or as such in the early days? And
the only exception to that was I did have a condenser mic for a while. I lost it at some point, and that's how I recorded the piano on Anjos from Florine. There's this kind of like, really like lilting piano heavy song called Anjos, and I remember recording it with the condenser mic with the phantom power on my RC50. And that came out in 2009, but I don't know if it was like laziness or whatever. And when I was making The Magic Place in 2010, I specifically remember singing into the laptop, and I think, once I started, I think the same year, I was making a record with Roberto, Alado Negro Roberto, and I would send him vocals and he'd be like, "How are you recording these?" I'm like, I just sing into my laptop. He's like, "Julianna, what are you doing?" So, but yeah, that's how I used to do it,
Do you know Paul Peabody at Brainfeeder? Peabody.
No.
He was he works at Brainfeeder and releases music, but he wanted some piano stuff, and he just wanted it on the iPhone. He didn't want it done on proper mics. He just record it on your iPhone. It's fine. Like it's. I think it's like I what you do is, and it's so inspiring. I think for the listeners to listen about, because I think there's so much pressure to know everything about Ableton or Logic, and know every setting and be a super producer and know this, know that. And like when I do the piano music, I dabble with lots of different things, but ultimately I just want to keep it as just raw and simple, really. And you don't. It's great if you do know everything, but you don't. I guess my point is, and maybe you agree, you don't have to.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you've built this amazing body of work, I mean, thank you very much. It's just very inspiring, I think, that the fact that you don't have to have all this equipment, and you can if you want, but it's not a necessity.
Totally. I mean, people, are very surprised by that still.
Yeah.
But even like Healing is a Miracle, my record that came out in 2020, I mean, besides the tracks featuring Yonzi and No Such Thing, like those are all, I've made all of those at home on GarageBand. And I think that it is good for anyone who wants to make music by themselves at home. I mean, every Mac comes with GarageBand, so anybody can do it. And like I said, in the early days, I was going to GarageBand workshops at Apple stores in New York City. They're free. We're free, I had no money. So I was learning from there, and it's just kind of, at this point, it's kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it works. So, and I know how to do it like the back of my hand, just like my machines, like my gear. So yeah, I had to learn Ableton for a project that I did, but I just went back to my roots.
Yeah, for your main stuff. So just getting towards your last picks now. You've got let's play two at once. So like we've got Tori Amos and Silent All These Years, and then Apex Twin and Alberto Balsam. Is it Balsam? Alberto Balsam. I think that was a brand of shampoo. I mean, when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
I think Alberto, but I remember that as a kid, like my mum used to put that shampoo on my head. Unless I'm completely tripping right now, but I mean, he probably would name a track after that, wouldn't he? But yeah, let us know about those two picks if that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, Tori was as big of a deal to me as Bjork was. Another one of those things, a friend of mine I think it was like 9th grade, had a Tori Amos CD, and it was when I think I remember asking, like, what kind of music does she make? And he was like, it's hard to describe. And I was like, is it country? Like, what is it? It's like I hadn't, done a deep dive into quote unquote alternative music yet. But I mean, I discovered her music, and between her piano playing and her voice and the uniqueness of her material and provocativeness of her material, especially as someone who grew up going to church 3 times a week, I became deeply, deeply obsessed with her also obsessed with the way she looked. I still think that Tori Amos is one of the most beautiful women that's ever lived, and I pretty sure I can still draw her from memory. So that tells you that the obsession was extremely, extremely deep. Yeah, I mean, I slept outside overnight in Tulsa in 1997 to get front row center tickets to her show. So yeah, big influence, super big influence.
Amazing pianist as well. Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, who was the other person?
Well, it's quite a weird combination of tracks, actually, I guess. But Apex Twin and Alberto, the shampoo track.
Yeah, exactly. So Tori, I found in like my freshman year of high school, and then the Apex track was, I think when I was like a senior or something, and a friend of mine had it playing in his car, and I just remember hearing that sound of the whatever furniture it is that's scooting on the floor, and just being like, oh, this doesn't have singing on it, this is what is this, and then the scooting sound, and it's just such a unique track, and it's so beautiful. I just had to throw it in to this list because I feel like maybe that was one of my first moments where I was listening to wordless sort of electronic or ambient music, and it had a real it made a real impression for me because I'd never heard anything like it before. And oh my gosh, if I had $1 for every time I've listened to that track since then, oh my goodness, I could go to Hawaii. I could go to Hawaii right now.
Okay, so this is Tori Amos and Silent All These Years, and Apex Twin and Alberto Balsam.
Excuse me, but can I be you for a while? My dog won't bite if you sit real still. I got the Antichrist in the kitchen yelling at me again. Yeah, I can hear, been saved again by the garbage truck. I got something to say, but nothing comes. Yes, I know what you think of me, you never shut up. Yeah, I can hear that. What if I'm a mermaid in these jeans of his with her name still on it? Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said, sometimes I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years. So you found a girl who thinks really deep thoughts. What's so amazing about really deep thoughts? Boy, you best pray that I bleed real soon. How's that thought for you? My screen got lost in a paper cup. Think there's a heaven where some screams have gone. I got $25 and a cracker. Do you think it's enough to get us there? 'Cause what if I'm a mermaid in in these jeans of his with her name still on it. Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said, sometimes I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years go by. Will I still be waiting for somebody else to understand? Years go by from stripped to my beauty and the orange clouds raining in my head. Years go by, will I choke on my tears till finally there is nothing left? One more casualty, you know we're too easy, easy, easy. Well, I love the way we communicate. Your eyes focus on my funny lip shade. Let's hear what you think of me now, but baby, don't look up. The sky is falling, your mother shows up in a nasty dress, and it's your turn now to stand where I stand. Everybody looking at you, you take hold of my hand. Yeah, I can hear them, but what if I'm a mermaid in these jeans of yours with her name still on it? Hey, but I don't care, 'cause sometimes I said, sometimes I hear my voice, I hear my voice, I hear my voice, and it's been here, silent all these years. I've been here, silent all these years, silent all these, silent all these years.
Yeah, talking about electronic music, I do want to talk about your Healing is a Miracle album on Ninja Tune, and you had No Such Thing as one of the artists you worked with on one of the tracks. Amazing electronic producer, and
Yeah.
also obviously John Z from Sigur Rós and Mary Lattimore.
Yeah.
And I'd love to for you to pick a track from the album to play today as well, and maybe one that's particularly meaningful to you.
Has to be In Spirit. That's the first track on the record. Yeah. Just because that was kind of really magical, the way that came together. I was just playing with my vocal pedal that I perform with and record with, and just, was just pressing things and came up with that, found that vocal setting and hit record.
And the bass is so nice. The bass in that track as well.
Yeah. So that track it just came together magically. I think I recorded it in like 30 minutes. The vocal track was one take, and then I was just messing around, and then I thought, this needs some like lung rattling bass just to like really just make it have this like polarity happening within, and thumbed through my bass bank and found one that was pretty rattling. And the whole track came together like so quickly, and it wasn't like anything I've ever made before, and it just means so much to me in so many ways. It's kind of hard to describe.
And the album obviously came out in the height of the lockdowns. And did you get to tour it as much as you would have liked, or probably not? I guess like you would have liked to have done. Like there was hardly any shows at that time. So
I had a huge UK and Europe tour scheduled for the fall of 2020 that got rescheduled to spring of last year, 2022. And then borders started closing again and COVID started getting crazy again. So it was booked once, rescheduled, and then we weren't going to reschedule it again because to reschedule it the first time was so much work, and then you're just kind of like trying to guess like this pandemic thing won't last more than a couple years, right? So let's just like do all of this work to rebook this entire tour. It just was too much, and so we were just like, you know what, we're just going to scrap it for now. So yeah, that really stinks because that was a beautiful tour. And it's been a long time since I toured the UK and Europe. I mean, at least since 2016. Been a long time, and I love doing that. I miss it so much. So yeah, it's a major bummer for all of us musicians, trying to play our shows. But I ended up working with Outermost, and we booked this tour that happened last May 2022, and it was the first time I'd toured in almost 6 years.
And how similar to the record do you keep? I mean, how much is your live performance? How much improvisation is going on? How similar is it to the album?
Very little improvisation these days, but I mean, I think, in the early days when I performed, I did a lot of improvising and, would just kind of see where it took me live and, take that chance, and it was scary and fun. But then I think by The Magic Place, which came out in 2011, I was teaching myself how to play the songs, and it's been that way ever since. But the thing is like, because I don't sample my vocal loops, I always make those fresh for every show, and nothing's on a click track. I mean, I have samples and things like that, but everything's made from scratch live. So there's always a little bit of wiggle room, and that's really fun because if I feel like it and I feel like building a loop for 12 minutes, I could if I wanted to, and it can be a little bit different. Every time it has to be a little bit different every time I play it.
Having the moments when you can do it. Our mutual friend, Raphael Anton Irizarry, he texted me to like join him on stage at Cafe Otto recently, and I was shitting myself. I can't say I wasn't, because he just wanted to. He wouldn't tell me what he was going to play. Basically, he just sort of said, "Oh, just come on the encore, and I'm going to play like it's going to be kind of E minor, but just play." And I'm coming from a piano like a little bit more like the notes are in a certain order or whatever. So, but I'd like faced the fear and I did it, and I'm very glad I did, because that's where magic can happen. I think if you do just maybe like when you went to ice, just try to do different stuff. Yeah, I just wondered how much you improvised. I guess I think it can get quite addictive.
Yeah, not very much anymore at all. I mean, Mary Lattimore and I have done a few tours together, and we had a few nights where we would like pick a key and improv at the end. Like, I'd play a set, she'd play a set, we'd do a little improv. But, outside of that, I'm not really doing that myself much these days.
We should probably like pick your final tracks before we sort of wrap up.
Okay.
Just because of we've got a set time on the show and stuff.
Okay.
I could talk forever, but
Same.
So Siegel Ross, Olsen is your next track.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let us know about that one, please, Juliana.
Well, I mean, as far as influential, there's no way that I couldn't have Sigur Rós on the list. I heard their music in like 2002. I think, when Vanilla Sky came out and it had the little, I'm not going to pretend to know how to pronounce anything, but that track exploded, and I got that record and saw them play in 2002 at Beacon Theater in New York, and just like haven't been the same since. I just remember being, completely moved by that concert, like you would with like a breakup or something. I felt like my heart was broken between the music and atmosphere and the visuals. It's just inimitable completely, and that concert just stuck with me for so long, like a breakup would or something. It just had such an emotional effect on me. And I remember I picked Olsen because I remember that being one of the first tracks that, I just thought was so beautiful. Their music is just so beautiful and unique. And I could not include.
Yeah, and now Johnsy has been on your last album.
Yeah, wild. I remember when he sent me his vocals that ended up being on In Light, the track from Healing is a Miracle. I just wept because that was I mean, to say that's a dream come true is like an understatement. That was, it still is absolutely surreal that there is a song out there that has our voices together.
This is Siegel Ross and Olsen. Just a random final question. Like, if you could like put an album out into the world, like not under your name, and no one ever knew it was like you, but something totally different musically, like totally different, what would you do?
It would probably be like dancey with R&B vocal stylings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know I didn't have any R&B tracks on this list, but the first records I ever bought with my own money were on vinyl, and it was Whitney Houston,
Yep.
and Lionel Richie, Dancing on the Ceiling. I have always been a huge pop and R&B, hip hop, everything. But since we're speaking about it now, the R&B is huge for me. I am a Whitney Houston fanatic, Mariah Carey, SWV. It just goes on and on and on.
Brandy.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I love it so much. I live to do karaoke and do Boys to Men or whatever, Yeah,
I think that's my question actually. The karaoke. What's the karaoke song? Yeah.
A bunch of times it's laughable because they're such difficult songs, and I'm sure it's extremely painful to listen to, but Vision of Love I've done many times, and I Have Nothing I've done many times. I absolutely love R&B, and I find myself, like when I perform live, once it's not looping anymore, I kind of have this tendency to like sing in that way. I just love it so much. So yeah, who knows?
You never know. I'd love to hear it. Good answer, by the way. So just to play us out, and well, thank you for coming on the show. First of all, Julianna, I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. Walk down memory lane.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. So I do it a lot on the show. Your last track is DLP 1.1 from the Disintegration Loops by William Basinski.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like how did you first sort of come across that classic?
I'm, with anything with music like that came out after 2000, I could almost guarantee it was from an Other Music recommendation. I used to get the Other Music newsletter email, and I can't tell you how much music I discovered that way. RIP Other Music, New York City, best record store ever. But I discovered that track, and the whole story behind it is, it was around 9/11, which of course, I moved to New York City May 2001, and 9/11 was just a few months later, so it had the meaning behind his body of work, Disintegration Loops, really spoke to me because I was there for that whole thing. But of course, at the same time, it was kind of this fascination with, I didn't discover it until years after I had made Sanguine, and I thought, this kind of sounds like the songs on Sanguine, this loop, this like just looping, and the track's like an hour long, and I just love the fact that it does disintegrate over time. It's my security blanket track, I would say. I've never said that before, but that's just what I just thought, and it's true. Like, and it's just kind of funny because I did have that, recognition when I heard it. I was like, oh, this is like looping like I like to do. It's just a beautiful track. His music
you sort of beautiful. Felt a sense of community. There was other stuff out there.
Yes. And then not long after that, I opened a show for him in 2013 And then again a couple of years later. So we got to meet up, and he's a wonderful human as well, which isn't always the case. It's definitely wonderful to meet him, and his music is gorgeous. It's just gorgeous.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing all your picks today and your time. And
Of course.
have a good rest of the day. And this is, as you said, the track's an hour long. So here, here's an excerpt of DLP 1.1.